One big swing by Francisco Alvarez was enough for the New York Mets on Saturday as they pitched another shutout. Can this bullpen continue to be the best in baseball with AJ Minter potentially going on the IL? I'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Saturday brought another win to the New York Mets as they shook off their rough loss on Friday night. And the recipe to win that game was one we've seen all year long. Pitching, pitching, pitching. The Mets continue to dominate with their arms in a way that none of us expected going into the season. And Klay Holmes deserves a lot of credit for getting this team off to a great start despite the weather, because he had to deal with a pushback start due to a rain delay. And then he gets to face two batters, and then another rain delay, has to sit for another 45 minutes, which is not easy to do for any starting pitcher, much less a guy that is just getting back into starting pitching after being a reliever for the last, whatever it's been, 4 years. So it was a very difficult start just to give the Mets any bulk. And Klay Holmes was dominant in this outing. It wasn't the 10 strikeouts that we've seen, but this was, I think, the best version of what Klay Holmes can be, where he's getting early outs. He's keeping the ball on the ground, and he can just mow through a lineup when he is that effective, when he's facing an aggressive lineup, as the Nationals were in this one. I mean, that's the type of pitching performance where I think in June, barring the weather, if it's just a sunny day and Klay Holmes is on the mound on a Saturday against the Nationals, where Klay Holmes could have cruised through 7 innings scoreless. I mean, that is how much he was dialed in. He allowed 4 hits, erased one of them with a double play ball, did not walk anyone. And if you look at the breakdown of his outs, 10 ground outs, but worth 11 because he had the double play. So 11 outs via the ground. He had 2 strikeouts. Francisco Alvarez caught a base runner, and there was 1 fly out. So really just an outstanding start by Klay Holmes to give the Mets 5 scoreless to open up the game, and the bullpen did the rest. And Francisco Alvarez deserves a lot of credit, not only because he was responsible for the Mets' only 2 runs, hitting an opposite field home run in the second inning, a ball that just kept on carrying and luckily stayed fair. And that was the only offense the Mets had all game, really. They did rack up, I think it was 8 hits. Francisco Lindor had 3 of them, including a bunt hit against a shifted infield. But there was no real rallies to speak of throughout the game. There wasn't really too many threats. I mean, the Mets just got by on that one swing, and it was thanks to Klay Holmes opening it up, and then it was thanks to their bullpen, but also Alvarez behind the dish. I really felt his presence in this one more so than I did on Friday. Maybe I was just watching the game a little bit closer than I did on Friday night. I don't know if that's what it was, but it's been a while since we've seen Alvarez catch a game. And what I felt from watching him was he was just exuding swagger, is the best way to describe it. He's got swag behind the dish, and he has a certain level of confidence that I feel like really permeates through the pitchers, where that was as in control Klay Holmes has looked all year, where he was just on attack from pitch one, felt like he was comfortable throwing any pitch in any count. And there was one strikeout in particular where Klay Holmes dotted the outside corner, and just the way that Alvarez receives the pitch, frames it, and already starts to throw the ball to third base, he's daring that umpire to call that pitch a ball because he knows it's a strike. It was really fun to watch Alvarez do his thing behind the dish, and it's funny because Luis Torrens was amazing for the Mets. I mean, he filled in admirably, both him and Hayden Sanger. They did an incredible job with his pitching staff, helping it become the best pitching staff in baseball early on this season because of the work of those 2 defensive-minded catchers. And Torrens got so many clutch hits along the way. But he's not a 23-year-old potential superstar. And Francisco Alvarez, I've been talking about the neck tattoo since he was in high A or whatever it was. When I first noticed, did he really tattoo the best in red ink on his neck? And it's a mindset when you do that, okay? It's a confidence that he carries into every facet of his game. And I think you're starting to see it with that swing with the bat. Feel like he was on attack throughout this game in his at-bats. And it's just a guy that has a limitless ceiling. I mean, he could be the best catcher in baseball. That is the ceiling for Francisco Alvarez. Luis Torrens can be a really nice starter in the big leagues, and right now he might be the best backup catcher in baseball, but he doesn't have the ceiling to be the best catcher in baseball like Francisco Alvarez. So as much as fans are saying, man, what do you do with Alvarez and Torrens? I think you're seeing right now what you do. You play Francisco Alvarez, and Luis Torrens is a great backup catcher that's going to get a start per series most of the time, especially on, I'm sure he'll be in there today on Sundays. You guys are listening to this because it's a day game after an afternoon game, but a late afternoon game that ended in the night. So I imagine Torrens will be out there, and then they'll go right back to Alvarez on Monday. That's how I think they'll probably line it up. But I thought Alvarez caught a great game, and you even see here's Danny Young. All of a sudden, he found the strike zone, and I don't know if that is a credit to Alvarez or just something that's been building lately. Because Danny Young, as soon as I sold my stock, so I guess I'll keep it sold because I was on Danny Young Island by myself for a long time last year. I was like, man, this guy's great stuff. And he had a couple stretches last year where he was awesome. And I kept on, trying to hold on to the rope for him. Like, I still think he's good. I still think he's good. And then he had, I think it was the rough outing against the Marlins where I was just like, yeah, I'm out. Since I've been out, he's been great. And his last two appearances have been awesome. You could say this was the most impressive outing of the year for Danny Young, but his last one was striking out Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber in a huge spot. So I think that one still probably takes the cake, but he comes up in a similar situation as far as going through the teeth of the Nationals lineup with Klay Holmes at 70 pitches, but all the delays. Carlos Mendoza goes to Danny Young first, and he's facing the top of the lineup, gives up a base hit to C.J. Abrams, but then strikes out James Wood, Nathaniel Lowe, and Josh Bell. So really good work out of Danny Young. Reed Garrett comes on. He had a bend but didn't break inning where he gave up a couple of hits, stranded both runners. I thought it was interesting that there was a would-be double play ball that Luis and Acuna bobbled, and the Mets were lucky to get one out on it. It's just funny to me because I just know if it was inverse and Jeff McNeil was the second baseman in that exact same spot who made the same play, the Mets fan base would be outraged. But Luis and Acuna has all of the cachet in the world right now among Mets fans. They love him, and rightfully so. But it's just funny the difference when it's depending on who the guy who has the misstep or the mishap. When it's Acuna, the young kid that everyone wants to see play, no one really is going to bat an eye. But if it's Jeff McNeil, who everyone's a little bit tired of, I mean, fans would have lost it. But regardless, Garrett gets through that inning. Eighth inning, AJ Minter comes in for his second back-to-back of this season. And he only threw 10 pitches on Friday night. So I don't blame Carlos Mendoza for going to him. And he looked great to the first batter he faced. CJ Abrams struck him out, had him sitting cutter, and just dotted a fastball on the black on the outside corner. So that was a really impressive strikeout. And then he's facing the next batter, and all of a sudden he's exiting with an arm injury. I'm going to talk about that more throughout the show today, but definitely a cause for concern. But credit to Max Kranick, second time in as many appearances, he has to come in cold. This time he didn't rush, and I think that was a real lesson that he learned from just recently doing it, that he needs to take his time to get ready. There's no rush to get right on it. Now, he did inherit a 3-1 count, and that led to the first walk he has issued all year, but he settled in right after that, gets a couple huge outs in a row to get out of that inning and to bridge the gap to Edwin Diaz. And then Edwin Diaz comes on. He doesn't have his control early, and this is, again, a moment where I feel like you see Francisco Alvarez's impact really settled down Edwin Diaz, and he finished that inning looking dominant, striking out the last couple batters he faced, and overall 3 strikeouts in an inning where he just walked one. Great stuff from Diaz, one of the best outings he's had all year, really looked sharp at the end of it. And altogether, the Mets bullpen goes 4 scoreless. Klay Holmes pitched the first 5 scoreless, so a shutout for the New York Mets. And this bullpen continues to be the backbone of what has been a great baseball team so far. How much will losing AJ Minter impact that? I want to talk about where this bullpen's at right now, the role that Minter has filled, and how they'll try to replace it throughout the rest of the show. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel, you can place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. This year, the Mets have had the best bullpen in baseball, though there's probably 2 or 3 teams that could say the same thing. They could say that their team has the best bullpen in baseball. The Padres stand out as they have the best bullpen ERA at 1.61. The Giants, second best at 2.39. The Mets are third best at 2.46. The Mets are also third best in strikeouts, fifth best in WHIP. But if you look at wins above replacement, according to FanGraphs, the Mets do have the best bullpen in baseball. So we'll stick with that. But really, before I talk about AJ Minter and what's going to happen next, I just wanted to take a minute to reflect on how good this bullpen has been this year, because they're covering so many innings pitched, 102 and a third innings pitched so far from the Mets bullpen. Let's see how many innings the rotation has covered here. The rotation is at 138 and a third. So you have not quite a 50-50 split, but let's see how many innings overall. 231 innings. So we'll just do quick math. 102 divided by 231. Yeah, 44% roughly. So around 45% of the innings pitched this year have come from the Mets bullpen. And there's been a lot of times where this rotation has been great, mind you, but they'll have a starter go out there for the 6th inning and get into some trouble, and they find a way to put the right reliever in who gets out of that jam. And sometimes if it's Huascar Brazoban, Reed Garrett, or Max Kranick, that guy's staying on and giving the Mets another inning after that. So it's just been this incredible flexibility that this bullpen has had, where everyone has evolving roles. They have a lot of Swiss Army knives that could pitch in so many different situations, particularly those 3 guys that I feel like have really been the anchor of the bullpen, or the anchors of the bullpen, having Brazoban and Kranick, who've just been unbelievable, pounding the strike zone. Each of them has cleared 16 innings pitched. Kranick's at 16 and 2/3. Brazoban's at 16 and a third. So 33 innings between those 2 guys. Both have whips well below 1, which is walks and hits over innings pitched. So they're letting up less than a base runner per inning. They're barely walking anyone. Kranick issued his first walk today. And again, I will mention 3-1 count that he inherited. Brazoban has issued 4 walks all year. They've just been awesome at coming in, pounding the zone, and picking up outs. And that has been so huge to take pressure off of other guys, to give other guys rest throughout the early going this season. Jose Butto deserves some credit for that as well. He's gone 14 and a third and pitched to a 2.51 ERA, though he has given up a lot of inherited runs from my memory. But the guy that's been the opposite of that is Reed Garrett, who was 9 for 9 coming into today's outing, and he pitched a clean inning from the start. So he did not have to inherit any runners this time, but he's been the ultimate fireman, stranding again 9 for 9 on those inherited runners, and has not allowed a run of his own. 13 appearances. He's just been lights out. And so you've had the ability so far this season to pitch a Reed Garrett if you need to as the first guy out of the bullpen when that starter gets into trouble. Then you have a Brazoban or a Kranick that can bridge the gap either straight to Edwin Diaz or to the setup man. And you've had Ryan Stanek and AJ Minter pitching in your more traditional setup man roles of 7th, 8th innings and getting the job done. And then you have Danny Young, who's come around a little bit lately, but he's more of your traditional lefty specialist. And then Edwin Diaz, who has been, ironically, the worst pitcher in this bullpen this year by ERA. He has a 4.50 ERA. Granted, he has 20 strikeouts and 12 innings pitched. So the stuff is still there for Edwin. I don't think he's quite reached that rhythm that we can see him get into where he can be a lights out closer. He hasn't quite gotten there, yet he has 7 saves. But this bullpen has been so good because of the combination of Brazaban, Kranick, and Budo, the long men. Garrett as this ultimate fireman, putting out everyone else's fires. Having a couple dependable setup men where there's been so much pressure taken off Edwin Diaz. It's just about getting the job done in those save situations. And so far, so good across the board. It's pretty remarkable that we're almost in May, and this AJ Minter injury is the first one to this Mets bullpen, or the first time this bullpen has had to switch out an arm, because last year, I mean, they were cycling arms every single day. There was a roster move. This guy's going back down to AAA. This guy's coming up. The Mets are throwing out there Tyler J. I mean, Reed Garrett was the first guy that was a come up because the bullpen was tired. Yohan Ramirez. What was the other guy's name who latched up? Michael Tonkin, who I think came back a couple times. I mean, there was just so much of that up and down, up and down. This year, it's been 8 guys from opening day all the way through April 26th. The one exception was when the Mets needed a long man, and Max Kranick had a little 24-hour stint in Syracuse, but just hanging out in the Mets clubhouse while Hageman came in and gave the Mets some bulk relief and then went right back down, and Kranick had his roster spot again. So it's a unit that has been so incredible that you were sort of ruining the day and just waiting for a shoe to drop where something would happen. And unfortunately, it's a big blow because AJ Minter is, despite all the success of some of these other guys, the arm that I probably was the most confident in as just being a steadying presence all year long. I mean, because he's been doing it in this division for so long. He got that hip cleaned up, and it just felt like he was really getting into such a great rhythm. Again, the strikeout that he had in this outing today was really impressive, the way he just was able to freeze CJ Abrams, a good hitter with the fastball on the black, his ability to locate pitches, his ability to throw that cutter in any count, fastball, to locate it all 4 quadrants of the zone. He's just a good pitcher. And this is a real shame that the Mets are losing this guy, because he's a huge piece of that bullpen. Without him, there's a lot more pressure on Ryan Stanek to be a really good setup man. He's had a nice year so far, but he hasn't looked anywhere near as consistent as AJ Minter. Minter, he gave up 2 runs, and I think it was either his second or third appearance of the season. And since then, he's allowed only 5 walks and 6 hits. He's had 11 scoreless appearances in a row, and he did not allow a hit in 7 of them. So actually, I think it's only 5 hits and 6. I think it's only 5 walks and 6 hits allowed all year. So some of them came when he gave up those 2 runs to the Marlins, if I'm not mistaken. And again, of those last 11 appearances that have all been scoreless, he did not allow a hit in 7 of them. I mean, that just shows you how dominant this guy's been. And now you're going to be without him, and you don't know for how long. So that's what I want to talk about next. What is the injury diagnosis on AJ Minter? Is it as simple as bringing up Dedniel Núñez to replace him? I'll go through that all in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, and the Mets are coming back this week to Citi Field. If you want to catch the crack of the bat, feel the roar of the crowd, smell that ballpark food. If you're looking to go to a game last minute, Game Time is the place to go that makes getting tickets easier than ever with last minute deals, all-in pricing, and a lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as game time gets closer, meaning you could score an incredible deal. When I go to the ballpark, I wait until I'm about to walk in before I get my tickets. I open up the Game Time app. I can view my seat before I buy, so I know exactly what to expect when I arrive, and I can buy my tickets in a matter of seconds. They're sent right to my phone. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks from the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and you get the line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com FanDuel.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about this injury to AJ Minter. We still don't know exactly what it is, so I don't want to theorize too much, but it is triceps tightness is what they're describing it as, and he's going to get imaging done, and the Mets will then set a course of action. The good news is triceps tightness does not necessarily mean the elephant in the room that you're all wondering about when a guy throws a pitch and exits the mound in pain. What are we thinking of? We're thinking of two letters. And if this was a forearm, I'd be more concerned. So if you're just thinking about where this injury is, triceps pointing on YouTube, we're talking back here. UCL, it's an elbow injury. Forearm leads into the elbow. Triceps, it doesn't mean for sure that this is not going to come back with something that could be serious. We really don't know. But as AJ Minter said himself, he's just happy it's not to his elbow. So the hope is that this is, some type of injury. I don't know if it's like a tendonitis or who knows what it is, but it's, maybe some type of a strained tricep, which could keep him out, but ultimately they can get him back. And you could eventually get to a point where maybe near the same time, or who knows, maybe Brooks Raley beats him back. Now that the Mets have signed Brooks Raley, they still have sort of down the line a couple of really high-end veteran left-handed pitchers that could be joining this team, in the middle of the summer and giving them a lift at some point. In the meantime, you got to get through it. So how will the Mets get through it? The most obvious solution is you bring up your stud that you have waiting in the wings in AAA, and that's Dedniel Núñez. And this is finally an opportunity for him. So bring him up and see what happens. And that's still my guess on what the Mets will do here. Other 40-man options, you have Kevin Herget, who's doing okay in AAA, Austin Warren, Tyler Zuber, who actually hasn't been pitching very well. If you want a lefty, Anthony Gassé, who's not on the 40-man roster, but the Mets, I think they have extra spots right now. He's pitching to a 3 ERA through 9 innings pitched with 9 strikeouts, I believe. Genesis Cabrera has a 7.88 ERA, but he's got a lot of MLB experience last year. 12 strikeouts in 8 innings. He did look good at the beginning of spring and then seemed to go through a little bit of a funk, but maybe he just found something recently. So I would not rule out Genesis Cabrera being added to this roster just due to his experience. And if Dedniel Núñez isn't ready, and also if they wanted another lefty in the pen, I could see a case for Genesis Cabrera despite his bloated ERA. You also have Brandon Waddle is pitching really well, but as a starting pitcher, and he just threw a couple days ago. So Waddle, in some respects, to add him to the 40 would make some sense. Give you another bulk guy out of that bullpen. But I don't really know if that's the move the Mets are going to go with here. So through all of that, all roads typically would lead back to Dedniel Núñez, because if you need a setup man, he's your guy. The question is, how much of a burden can he take on? So I want to go through how they've managed his workload this year. First 2 outings of the season, he got 3 days off in between. Then he had exactly 2 days off between his next 3 appearances. Gets 4 days off after that. Then he threw 2 appearances in 3 days, so only 1 day off in between. That is getting you ready for a big league opportunity. I remember I said that early this season. Once we see Núñez, throwing with only 1 day off, you could start to imagine he'd be ready to go. If he ever threw back-to-backs, I was like, okay, well, then he's definitely ready to go. He hasn't done that yet. He threw again, 2 appearances in 3 days, got 3 days off, and then they did it again. 2 appearances in 3 days. Now, the question is that just workload management? And now that they've checked him out, they feel good about it, can they bring him up and have him pitch 3 times in a week? Because that's really what he hasn't done yet. He hasn't thrown 3 times in a week. So is that possible? Can he come up? And he did pitch. He's had 1 day off. He pitched on Friday. So if you bring him up, can he pitch on Sunday is the first question. If he can't, who knows? Maybe the Mets wait on even designated AJ Minter. They might just pitch a man down on Sunday and then decide on Monday. But if he pitches on Monday, can he go Wednesday? And if he goes Monday, Wednesday, can he pitch on Saturday if the Mets need him to? And that would be getting a couple days rest in between. But is he able to really be leaned on in that bullpen? Or does he need, really to be protected? And the Mets still comfortable with that, because even if they get 2 appearances from him a week, if they are 2 appearances in very high leverage, maybe it's worth it to them. So that's the one thing. I just don't know where they're at with Dedniel Núñez. And Stats aren't great either. I don't think they care about that as much, but he hasn't been striking out guys at the same clip as he did last year in Syracuse, and he's been walking more guys. With that said, I really think if they brought him up, the adrenaline would kick back in for Dedniel Núñez. I think it's a lot tougher to go back and have AAA success when you're not pitching to get back into the big leagues, but you're sort of in this extended spring weird limbo that he's been in. Probably a little bit tougher to get up for those appearances. So I imagine you get him back on a big league mound and you'll see the Dedniel Núñez that we all know and love. And that's, to me, what the Mets should do here. You know what? You bring him up, you let him pitch for a little bit, and if he's still not able to shoulder enough of a workload, when you eventually go to a 6-man rotation and Paul Blackburn's good to go, maybe Núñez is the guy that goes back down because you find a Danny Young more valuable to this bullpen. The guys that they can't afford to lose at this point, it's Brazoban, it's Kranick, it's Budo, and then, of course, Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, and Edwin Diaz. They still have 3 longmen that I think they really like. They have a lights out setup man who's just a high leverage monster in Reed Garrett. They have a good 7th, 8th inning guy in Stanek, and they got their closer in Edwin Diaz. Dedniel Núñez would just give them another really good iron in the fire that can pitch and leverage. And so I think that's where the Mets go with this one. And ultimately, if Dedniel Núñez is the guy we've seen in the past, this bullpen would not take that much of a step back, although I still think they will miss the veteran presence of AJ Minter. Hopefully, it's not a long stint on the IL. Now, getting into the third game of this series, it's now split 1 game apiece, Mets Nationals. Mets are an interesting spot with their bullpen because Diaz just threw 22 pitches with the little bit of an injury scare, his last appearance. Are they comfortable having him pitch in back-to-backs? If it's a save situation, I'd be curious. Max Kranick has not pitched a back-to-back yet this year, so I'd imagine he's not going to be good to go. Reed Garrett, he's pitched 2 games in a row, so I doubt he's going to go 3 days in a row. I think he'll probably back in there on Monday, but I imagine they give him Sunday off. So if those 3 guys are burned, you're going to have to rely on some other guys to really step up. Jose Budo has gotten 3 days rest, so I'm sure he's going to be pitching after David Peterson. And then you have Brazoban, who's been – actually not Peterson, sorry, Tyler McGill in this one. So I imagine that Budo – is the guy after McGill, unless, of course, it's a big spot. Maybe they don't want him to pitch with their hand runners. Maybe they go to a Brazoban, who has a bit of a rubber arm, so I'm sure he'd be good to go. Danny Young, I don't think they'd hesitate to throw him in a back-to-back situation, especially considering how good he looked in this last outing. So if they have a big spot with those lefties in the lineup, I'm sure Young is going to be called on. And then you have Stanek, who got a day, so I'd imagine he's good to go. He had a rough outing in this series already, but hopefully he can get back on the good side of things. So we'll see where the Mets are at, but it would probably behoove them to get an arm that can pitch on Sunday if they are going to make a roster move for AJ Minter right now. And so that's where I'd be very curious. Is it Núñez? Is he ready? Or do they just call somebody up that's fresh and then maybe make that move for Núñez later down the line? We'll see what the Mets do here, but this is the first bit of adversity that this bullpen has faced. They have risen to the challenge with Max Kranick stepping in for injured pitchers a couple times recently, and they've survived it. Now we'll see if they can survive their first injury of the season and keep things rolling without a guy that's been a big part of that pen. Now, Mitchell Parker is going to go for the Nationals. He's coming off an outstanding start against the Orioles. 8 innings pitched, only 1 hit allowed, no runs. He's got a 1.39 ERA in the season. Tyler McGill is at, 109 if I'm not mistaken? Checking that real quick. Yeah, 109. Now, Parker's not going to strike out guys the way McGill is, but he's going to pitch to contact, and he's found a lot of success this season. Last year, though, the Mets got to Parker a couple of times. He gave up 5 runs in each of his starts against the Mets. Francisco Alvarez, Francisco Lindor, Tyrone Taylor, and Mark Vientos all hit home runs against him, but I doubt that Alvarez is going to be in the lineup unless they DH'd him. I don't think that they'd be bold enough to do that. I kind of love it if they DH'd him instead of Marte. But Marte will probably be in there at DH, Acuna at second base. McNeil will likely get a day. And Tyrone Taylor, of course, will be back out there in center field. Everything else should be your normal lineup with Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, Lindor. That's all going to be the same. Vientos, I'm sure, is going to be out there with the lefty on the mound. So that's what the Mets are looking at with this one coming up. Hopefully Tyler McGill can keep his great season rolling. The Mets can put the first bad start on Mitchell Parker's ledger this year, and they can put themselves in line to potentially win a series on Monday. So we'll see what happens here. Mets Nationals on tomorrow's show. I'll break down whatever news we get on AJ Minter. I'll break down this game, and I'll preview the final game of this series, Mets Nats. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch or listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. This is our show that breaks down everything going on in Major League Baseball each night throughout the season with insights from all 30 of our local hosts and a couple hosts that will take you on the journey each night. Check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube feed as well as your podcast feed for Locked On MLB.